Hey everybody, I'm here with Carl Paoli, and if you don't know him, he's just been an inspiration over several years, probably a decade by now, in regards to just the overall amount of information he was able to put out on the internet in regards to training, progressions, a lot of gymnastics related strength training, delved into CrossFit, especially because it was extremely popular at the time. And he himself is or was a gymnast and at the elite level. So he does a lot of coaching now, and we'll talk a lot about this and the content creation that comes, or the difficulties behind the scenes of all that stuff. And yeah, hey man.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for the intro and for having me. I mean, we connected. We were just talking offline a second ago about how we connected, and it was because I did a YouTube live just impromptu to see what would happen, and you resonated with some of the things that I was sharing, and we got to talking. So we decided to record this and see where it goes. But yeah, this has been an interesting ride. I was just looking at myself here in the camera. I'm like, oh, you're not a young buck anymore. You're a middle aged dude who lives in California who, yeah, is known to some degree in the fitness space, CrossFit industry as
Mm-hmm.
the person who was creating content around assisting people and learning about gymnastics applied to fitness. And one of the things that I tried to do, which I don't know if it landed or not, I guess to some degree it did because I wrote a book about it, but the mission I was on, and I continue to be on in some way, is to develop a language that help people understand human movement, human expression, the inner workings of the mind and emotions, and then how that could bridge into performance at the highest level, whether it was in sport, artistry, business development, content creation, whatever it may be. So here we are.
Yeah, and it's very interesting how you said, like, you're looking at yourself and you see yourself as this older middle-aged person, and it didn't really. I don't know how old you are exactly. I'm 39.
41.
You're 41. I'll be 40 in a few months. And so, it just hit me like very recently that like I'm technically middle aged. Like, you know what? Like it just like, yeah, I went from like, I'm like the same guy I was in my 20s. Like I feel the same. I still feel the same, obviously. But like,
Mhm.
um but it just hit me like, oh, like this concept of middle aged, like that's me. Like it's so strange. And I always felt like I'm a late bloomer in everything. Like so it takes a while for me to like actually like assimilate this kind of information. I just go with, if I had no preconceived like notions of how long I'm gonna live and like what's the average human lifespan, or when you're supposed to start a family and do all that stuff, I would not consider myself any different than I was like 5-10 years ago in regards to energy level, or you know degrading, like my human body degrading or anything. But I think it's because we take care of ourselves. I mean, I do like I still work out my body. Like I do strength work all the time. I do flexibility work. I do a yoga class every once in a while. I teach yoga classes once in a while. So like I think all of this balances out the physical aging. It's kind of like anti-aging essentially, which I'm huge on. It's very important that people be strong or maintain a certain level of strength to have that bone density, so that when they're older they're not like just falling and breaking a hip, or whatever comes from decades of neglect. And that is one of the reasons that I do what I do, is like just help people figure out how to not just move their bodies, but like do it in a sustainable manner, because not everyone has 2 hours 3 times a week to train vigorously, especially if you are busy with your career and family and all that stuff. And finding ways to make that work is really my passion, like to really help people out in that regard. And I'm very curious, how do you like, what are you most passionate about in regards to fitness these days? Like, what do you do to stay fit? I've always been curious about your personal like regiment, or and how that's maybe evolved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. Yeah, first and foremost, I resonate with a lot of what you're saying because I still feel very young and I feel healthy. And although I have aches and pains, they are mostly due to stress. And it's
Mm-hmm.
stress induced by lifestyle and certain circumstances that I've been navigating. But it's all manageable, and I'm not very concerned about them long term because I know how to mitigate the problems. I mean, there are simple solutions, and an example is if I notice that I'm feeling, just tight, or my mind can't settle, or I feel like something's hurting. It
Mm-hmm.
takes me less than 3 minutes to just do some breath work to turn that around,
Mm-hmm.
or to roll on a soft ball around my abdomen, and all of a sudden my nervous system starts to change. Or
Right.
just if I'm sitting here at my computer, of course I wear glasses right now because I have issues with nearsightedness, so presbyopia. I'm growing older. My eyes are growing older, but
You're
just with
farsighted.
some uh,
You
uh, uh, yeah, I can see at the distance, but when I look up close, I'm like, oh, what's happening?
gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so but just like little subtle eye stretches, which also um, relates to somatic tracking or somatic therapy, which is really powerful to just know these things because it
Right.
allows me to continue to feel fluid, although I need to do more maintenance on myself along the way. Anyways, it's a long-winded way of getting to the question that you just asked, which is right now I'm most fitness driven by my grandson.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to rewind a little bit here. 10
Mm-hmm.
years ago, I became a foster parent alongside my wife, and then we adopted a teenager. She is now a mother, and she's a single mother, and we co parent.
Mm-hmm.
We are grandparents, and she's the mother, of course, but we co parent our grandson. So our grandson lives part time with us and part time with his mother. So we have a 2-year-old, really active young boy who is, I mean, gymnastics, skateboarding, parkour, the whole thing. He's two years
He's
and
only
three
2 years
months.
old.
He's insane,
That's
absolutely
amazing.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he hits a full handstand.
Really.
He does a
I,
donkey kick into full handstand, and the dude doesn't even know what he's doing. It's just, I'm like,
Amazing.
who are you, right?
Right. Does
And
he know?
yeah,
Is this because of your influence? Like he sees you doing things, and then like just because they.
maybe. I mean, I've definitely stood on my hands around him, so he knows about standing on your hands. And as soon as he was 18 months, we put him into gymnastics.
Oh.
In fact, where he does gymnastics now is exactly where we met his mother 10 years ago.
Oh wow.
His Yeah, she was one of Tanya, my wife's athletes,
Mm-hmm.
and my wife became a mentor of hers, and then eventually, because she was in the foster care system, we became foster parents and provided a home, and yeah, adopted, and the rest is history. So it's pretty amazing that we all met each other there. We built the family there. So gymnastics has to be in at least his epigenetics.
Right. Right. The
Right.
environmental influence. I
Exactly.
mean, yeah,
So
definitely,
that's
especially
cool.
if you put him in the gymnastics classes at 18 months. I didn't even know they could be started that early, I guess. And some sort of, it makes sense. Sure, just hanging, just like
Yeah.
playing around, crawling on the floor in different ways. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't do any of he's not like the most structured kid, but he's
Of
the
course.
most experimental, and he calls his gymnastics acro sports, which is the name of the organization that hosts the
Mm-hmm.
classes, and it's really cool. Anyways, my whole thing is I don't want to keep up with this kid. I want to belong to his world.
Mm.
And in order for
Interesting.
me to belong to his world, I am skating.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we started doing when he was 20 months old was I would take my longboard, I would put him on the front, and we would just skate around the neighborhood. And he would just stand on the front as if he was skating, and I would hold
Yeah.
his hand.
I saw videos of you
Now he
doing
has his
that.
own
It's
skateboard.
super
Oh,
cute.
cool, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of skating,
Mm-hmm.
playground. So I have to climb up all these things with him, and sometimes I have to move quickly. So it requires me to climb up a cargo net or do like a muscle up or a pullover. I have to do like a squat on really quickly. Sometimes I have to jump off things. And what I started noticing was that, oh, you know what? I have neglected some parts of my fitness
Mm-hmm.
where I have not remained as elastic
Mm-hmm.
and dynamic as I should have, and now I'm having to work on it. So, I
Like
mean,
what, for
just like,
example? What's like the major one that comes to
mhm.
mind?
Yeah. So, for example, I noticed that when jumping off of something, I couldn't load up my quads in the
Mm-hmm.
landing and
Mm-hmm.
then be able to roll out of it without feeling some pain.
I
I was
see.
like, "Ooh, okay, I'm kind of fragile here." On top of that, he's in addition to being very active, this kid, he has also been very loving. So he loves to be carried. And I've done a lot of carrying with my left arm and a lot of work with my right arm, and that has caused shoulder problems for me, neck
Right.
problems. So
Mm-hmm.
I have to do a ton of accessory work for my shoulders. And some of the accessory work, the best is hanging. So like
Mm-hmm.
brachiation, swinging, one arm hanging. So I do that in the park while he's, going crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, so
Uh,
that's kind of what my fitness training is. And then when he's not around, I just did a session right now, kettlebell session. Yesterday I did a session where it was more with dumbbells. Yeah, it varies, but I'm trying to get stronger and I'm trying to get some of my acrobatic skills back in a way that allows me to be softer and agile to hang with him.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. And you have a very unique story considering that you became a foster parent of a teenager, if I'm understanding correctly, and then
Hmm.
she had a child, and it's almost like you're living multiple lives that most people would never ever experience. It's like you became a foster parent first, and even though you're technically a grandparent, I'm sure it feels like you're a father just as much. Like you said, she's a single mother, and so you and your wife are heavily involved. So it's almost like it's like a very like non-conventional pathway, and I'm sure you feel
Yeah.
like as invested, I don't know if invested is the right word, but as involved and responsible with this constant state of responsibility, always thinking about him, and it's very very cool, man. And my my wife, I got married like late last year, just maybe like 8 months ago now, seven
Nice.
months ago now, and we are actually expecting. So
Wow.
that is new, um, and I'm like even
Congrats.
like, thank you. I'm like even like careful about how I'm saying it. It's still like I've
Yeah.
processed it, but I guess there's going to be so much more processing to come, and it's really really made me think about where I'm taking my life,
Hmm.
because now I need to like really hone down on the side of just how do you say, like just being a caregiver and just providing anything and everything I can for this new life. that I am going to
Mm.
be completely responsible for. So
Mm-hmm.
that is, I guess part of being middle aged.
That is so awesome. That is so awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
are you is there anything that you're concerned about or worried about that you're like sometimes you have those moments where you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, "Holy crap, am I going to be a dad?" This is insane.
Um, you know what? I'm not like freaking out about it or anything, much to my own surprise. What I'm doing in terms of business side of things is becoming much more focused. Since the creation of my blog and YouTube channel, it's basically been a one-man show, almost like handling everything A to Z. And now I should have done this a long time ago, and I'm sure you have like your things that you wish you did differently back when you were like, growing massively in popularity, of how you could have utilized that much better. Essentially is like I'm now talking with different marketing agencies to understand how to improve upon the experience and of my website, so that the information is uh, more readily found. It's easier to read. The videos are going to be able to reach more people, create more like benchmarks for what piece of content is going to be actually relevant to most people. All sorts of like nitty gritty things that, like, I thought about, but now it's become much more systematic.
Mm-hmm.
And that part is exciting because I'm really sick of working alone. And like this, like, I know you were on I consider myself like, I guess the word is solopreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like, it's not a good thing in the long run. It's fine to start solo, right? But in the end, you need help. Just like if any business is to scale or you want to level up, you don't know I don't know anything about marketing. I'm here to make content to help people, right? That's
Yeah.
like the number one, like the whole reason, the whole mission was like, I'm a caring person. Like, I genuinely want to just give people the tools. Like you say, you have the tools, like when you feel an ache, well, you know what to do, right? I want to share that information every chance I get. Whenever I discover something, there's no point in keeping it to myself. Just like share that with people of what works for you. And so that's like the driving factor behind all this. But in the end, you need help, right? I wish, for example, when I started, I had like a email mailing list, like a
Mm-hmm.
newsletter, and collecting people's emails, because you're getting like thousands of visits from your websites or YouTube channel, but you don't actually own that audience. They could just be transient passing by, and they might really connect with you and really like you, but then you know uh, 5 minutes later they're onto something else, and they'll never like come back to you, maybe even if they
Mm-hmm.
did connect with you, right? So like, just like that little thing, right? Like it would have been huge if I had
Mm-hmm.
implemented that earlier. And so I can't really dwell on the past. It's very like non-constructive to mope and say I wish I did things differently, because there's a reason
Totally.
for everything to be the way it turned out anyway. And if there's really no other way to look at things, right? Because it would be all like, it would be too depressing.
Oh yeah, it's a don't go down that rabbit hole. You'll
Yeah,
yeah,
because
you'll get lost and scared and want to
yeah,
quit everything.
right, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear what you're saying. This is going to sound really strange, but the pain of a solopreneur is one that I experienced. I just remember sometimes driving through the city,
Hmm.
maybe going somewhere, and then seeing somebody maybe cleaning the streets, doing street cleaning, or something that is a public service. And I would think to myself, I kind of wish I did that job.
Right, I've been there.
And Yeah, and it wasn't
many times.
about, yeah, and this is not about being judgmental on the job itself or thinking that it's a simpler job.
Hmm.
But the thing that I was craving was to have a clear start and finish, which was, I was
Oh,
craving being able to say, okay, I start at 9 a.m. or at 5 a.m. or whatever it may be. I do my shift. I know I'm going to clean 3 blocks, 4 blocks, whatever it may be. And when I'm done with that, I'm done with the job. And then I get to move on to my life.
chilling. Yeah.
Solopreneurship is being in a constant state of thinking about how do you guide your life, your business
Right.
to a place of completion, fulfillment. And it's a place that you never get to. And you
Right.
can get extremely lost there, especially if you're juggling all of the balls yourself and you haven't created collaborative efforts or partnerships. Um,
Right.
yeah, it's brutal. It's
It's
brutal.
it's very difficult to set those boundaries because like you can be coming up with like an amazing piece of content that you want to share, but it's like midnight, you know,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like or it's whatever time, and you know you don't have to go to lunch for 30 minutes at a set time and clock in clock out. It's like, and there's themes to like running a business like this, with training as well, right? Like the discipline, the time management, consistency, motivation, what to do in like the face of adversity, right? Like all these same concepts apply with like training your body and finding that balance between what is sustainable. And I assumed, so like there's a statistic, right? Like a lot, like Gen Z, most Gen Zers or even the newer generation, when they're asked like what they want to be when they grow up, a lot of them say influencers. And that is
Jesus.
very crazy, right? Because
It's insane.
it's pretty nuts, because I wonder what the motivation is, because if it's fame, that's really the wrong path. I never did this to become famous. This is not That's not the driving force ever. Because I know it's not. There's a lot of drawbacks to being a celebrity. Like, yeah, it's
Hmm.
cool, like people respect you and like you genuinely and all that, but like it's more about just um, helping people, right? And so running a business is just, when you're doing so many things, it's pretty nuts. Like, and so much goes behind the scenes. Like just for this podcast, thinking what to wear, I had to
Hmm.
trim my hair, like setting up the microphone, the lighting, just the overall technical side of things, and then of course the prep of what you want to talk about, thinking about like researching beforehand. Sometimes you go to film something and you want to use this park, let's say, that's beautiful, and then
Hmm.
you're like, okay, I'm going to do it on this certain day. You go there and there's an event happening, and it's noisy, and it's like there's so much to it, right? There's like, and then there's the content itself. You need to have like a hook in the beginning. The content needs to be kind of catchy. The pacing of it, you got to remind them to subscribe and hit the bell, because like if they don't hit the bell, they actually will never get notifications that you put out a new video, right? It's like
Totally.
there's like all this, like, and there's competition, like all
Mm-hmm.
alongside this. There's people who have better gear, better camera, better speaking skills even, and you have to essentially figure out what is it about you that makes you different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is the most important part. And I'm very relatable, I know that, and I'm very good at spoon feeding information that might be complicated or complex. And there's a lot of YouTube channels where they are in the fitness realm, where they are like shirtless and they have the six pack, and they're like, you should get a shredded physique by doing, you know, this and six pack that and whatever. And you know, a lot of people want to have a shredded physique, especially when they're young. However, as you get older, it's not as relatable or relevant to what makes you attractive, right? And I think you were grappling with what kind of content to make yourself. And I think it's just, you have to always go back to, why did you ever start doing this in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what, and that's probably the most important thing to fall back on, because you do have a wealth of information. And what is it that you genuinely want to share with people? Because sometimes your audience might not even know that they need something from you that like they know nothing about, right?
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
you have it inside you, right? And um, yeah, it's a crazy process, and it's a creative process. Like all of this is very
100%.
very creative work. And there's a cool podcast that you should check out. It's called Make Art Not Content.
Nice.
The guy has like 8-10 minute long little episodes, and they're very powerful, and they're very like very cool, you know, like um, in terms of understanding how to use your mind, gearing it to be more efficient in that creative process, you know.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's this video I made once talking about the creative process itself. Always goes through 5 steps. It goes like, in the beginning, when you first have the idea, it's like, this is awesome, right? In your head, just like, oh, this is going to be amazing, right? And then when you start to work on it and you realize this is tricky, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're in the middle of it, and like what you have in mind, what you had in mind initially and what it is now is like, in your head you're like, this is shit, you know,
Mm-hmm.
this is garbage, right? You start
Mm-hmm.
hating it, like, why did I even do this, right? And then it gets even deeper, where you're thinking like, I'm shit, like this is
Mm-hmm.
awful, right? Like, but then like you work through it, and then you realize, okay, like it's the video is coming together, or whatever, the book or whatever, the article, and you're like, this is actually okay. And then you're just tying up loose ends, and you're like, this is awesome. It's
Mm-hmm.
like there's not a piece of content that I've created where, I mean, very few, but like most, I would say 90% of things that I had to like come up with, where I didn't go through this process, you know? Like it's just, you know, sometimes more extreme, sometimes less, but like this like ride, this roller coaster essentially uh, of making content is wild, man. It is
Mm-hmm.
wild.
Yeah, it's really wild. You just reminded me. I had a guest on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
He's a writer. He's a funny guy. Ryan Orico is his name, and he said that in terms of writing, somebody has to suffer. It's either going to be the reader or the writer. So you want the reader to not suffer, so you better
Right.
take it on. And you said something interesting about this idea of finishing. You need to remember why you started, so you know how to finish. I think that's huge. I highly relate to that, and it's yeah, it's an ongoing process, and this idea of having a wealth of information to share, but not sometimes knowing what that information is to share is one of the biggest challenges I think somebody in our position faces, because if you especially if you're isolated at home and you're not in a certain environment that brings those questions up,
Right.
it's the thing that creates a big gap between you and your potential audience, or your even your current audience. And that's something that I failed terribly at, which was when I got to the point where I was starting to get some kind of notoriety, popularity within the CrossFit scene. It got a little crazy because people treat you like you know something that they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, I'm just a dude trying to figure it out. and sharing it with you, and you just happened to have gravitated towards it in a way that was useful for you. And I'm
Yeah.
so thankful that's the case. And although my ego was like, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted this attention and recognition, uh, the essence of myself always felt lonely and disconnected.
Hmm.
So I kind of became an island. I became a shell of myself when I showed up at places, and I could do these seminars. I mean, just so people get an idea, I remember putting out a seminar tour, and overnight, it basically sold. I think it was like 50% of the capacity sold out. It was like $67,000 all of a sudden in my bank account just overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sell this thing out. It was lucrative, but I go on this tour and I'm totally depressed. I'm just
Oh.
like, what? Yeah, what am I doing? Just alone in these hotels, and I'm going to these seminars where I'm too tired to train. I don't want to connect with anybody. Yeah, it's just miserable. And then realizing that the information that I was sharing, although valuable, for me was no longer exciting because it was just old news.
Right, and that's
And
something I grapple
yeah,
with as well.
mm-hmm.
Don't mean to cut you off, but like once I
No,
made a
that's good.
piece of content and like you know like you see like someone will say like how to do pull-ups, right, or how to get your first pull-up, right? Okay, I made a video on that, cool. But like you'll see other people constantly make videos
Mm-hmm.
regurgitating the same information, maybe in a slightly different format, a little different words. But like I don't enjoy doing that. You know, whether they're doing that for the algorithm or whatever, because they know that's a very popular topic. It's like hats off to them because that really it's something I've had trouble with doing as well, right? Like it's not as exciting once you release, like you wrote the
Mm-hmm.
freestyle book, right, on these different movements that you think are very practical. Imagine you did that again with just
Mm-hmm.
like uh, slight differences. It would.
Yeah.
Some people can do it. I can't. But yeah, sorry. I
No, it's cool,
yeah.
and I'm glad that that kind of rings true to you. And I think that where I'm trying to get to is that if you look at your content as a piece of art and a standalone, long-lasting contribution in some way that just is an extension of you, your knowledge, that you can make it belong to an ecosystem of things that you do, of content, services, products, just ideas that can feed into one another. And when you know how to place that piece of content strategically in a way that feeds in and out of an ecosystem of services, products, content, now you don't have to repeat the content unless you have come to a new conclusion and it needs to be revisited.
Hmm.
And
Right. Right.
that is key. That's how you
That's
make
ideal.
talking about push-ups exciting again.
Mm-hmm.
But I failed to do that because I myself, I was depleted. I didn't have any more energy. I just wanted away from the fitness industry. Just get me out of here. I hate it here. So I neglected the people that got me to where I was, and that sucks.
Yeah.
And I also neglected the thing that set me up for success. I mean, every this is the craziest part. Every single week, I get people either sharing my book online or talking about something that I addressed in videos 12 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, holy crap! This thing still resonates.
Yeah, you're timeless.
And that's crazy. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what did I miss here? You know, like where did I go wrong? And it was nowhere. There's nothing you can really do. But what I'm trying to get to is to two parts. One is if you are genuinely creating and contributing without the expectation that you're going to create some conversion,
Right.
you're probably creating the best shit you possibly can. Like
Yeah.
that's good stuff. And the other part is observe that what you're creating and how people interact with it, and then serve those people. Don't try to create new markets, new audiences. Serve those people, and then allow them to inform you as to how you can continue to do the thing that you love the most, which is maybe sharing an idea or sharing a thought around a movement practice or anything else that you may be creating. And I think that is extremely powerful to be able to grow with your audience. And here's a practical example for you. So when I first came into the CrossFit space, I just happened to have a lot of information around gymnastics, but I was a rebel. So I was like, "Fuck gymnastics! Who cares about gymnastics? I'm the freestyle athlete. You don't have to do a handstand with your legs straight. You can do it like this." And
Interesting.
CrossFit was just a perfect place for me to
I
talk
see.
about gymnastics that way,
Mm-hmm.
and it just kind of clicked. Okay,
I
so
see.
I got invited to do my first seminar, and it was a 4-hour seminar, and the gym paid me $800. Okay, they paid me $800 to go into this, and that was the most amount of money I had made per hour in my gymnastics fitness coaching
Sure.
career. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And so I decided going forward that if people are interested in this, I should do more of these. But what if I just sold the tickets? And this was not my own doing. I had a business partner that I was working with at the time, and so we took hold of the whole business, and we said, we'll sell the tickets, we'll manage the sales, the marketing, the whole thing. People will host us, and we'll give them something in exchange, either spots or a percentage of the income. So all of a sudden, I went from $800 to making between 10 and 15,000 bucks per day. That's a big jump. So you definitely scaled there just by taking control of the whole thing. But here's the deal: I showed up at these seminars without a plan. Okay, I just showed up, and I thought, well, I may
That's
talk
hard to
about these
believe.
things. Well, it's literally in the car. I would take like a piece of paper, and I would write down like a little framework. I'm like, I'm going to use this framework, and
Mm-hmm.
that would be the thing. In fact, one of the frameworks, position, movement, purpose, ended up becoming the framework for my book, and then I
Hmm.
expanded upon that. But the way that I did it was by asking questions. So I started asking questions,
Oh, I see.
and through the questions, people would reflect to me what they needed, and then I would use whatever expertise I had in helping them get their needs met. Eventually, I did this so many times that the questions were the same for everybody,
Same.
the needs were the same for everybody. So I would
Mm-hmm.
go to these places, and now I would simply regurgitate what everybody had told me they needed, and every step that I had found along the way, just perfected it. And people were like, oh my goodness, Carl is reading my mind. What is
Right.
happening? You are legendary. And I'm like, no,
That's
I
cool.
just did a ton of reps.
Right. You did a ton of reps in this realm.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to, if we just circle this back to creating the best content and growing with your audiences, continue to be curious about them. Continue to be curious about the person. I mean, that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you,
Mm-hmm.
because you were genuinely connecting to something that I said. And I'm like, I want to know you. Tell me.
Nice. Yeah, man. What I'm very curious. Like, what are those? Let's say top three things that people, or whatever top thing or top five things that people would that were always the same theme that people always had on their mind that they needed help with. I'm curious, since you mentioned that, since I'm sure other people here would watching this would have the same things in mind, possibly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in the CrossFit space,
Mm-hmm.
what people wanted was to become competitive,
Mm-hmm.
and there
Oh,
were
I
certain
see.
right. So it was always about competition, and one of the things that they wanted was to be able to do things as prescribed.
Oh.
So if the competition said that the standard is to squat 225, they wanted to be able to do a 225-pound squat for X amount of reps. And that was very easy for people to do because you can follow
A
not
program of some
linear, but
sort.
relatively linear progression that through incremental adaptations, everybody can get to a point where they're squatting 225 to some degree,
I see.
pain-free, effectively, efficiently, right? So
So it's like
that
a
was like,
very like militaristic kind of, the competitive side is like you need to be able to do this to reach
mm-hmm.
this. I see.
Yeah, and I was very familiar with competition because although it's called artistic gymnastics, it's all about meeting a standard that allows you to have a competitive advantage when you contrast yourself with your competitor or somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I know a lot about competition, and I know about the illusion of gymnastics, which is all about making your body look a certain way so that you look like the best. So I was all about the expression, the movement expression of the standard that they wanted to meet. So it was kind of like, okay, do you want to squat 225? Okay, well, let's act as if you were squatting 225 right now when you're just squatting body weight. What does that look like? How do we get there? And then in getting there, how do we tackle squatting in a way that opens you up to be stronger, more mobile, capable? And that was through this idea of creating transferability of a skill. So it's saying, how does a squat actually translate into a pull-up?
I
And
see.
people are like, well, how does that even make sense? Well, there's a million ways to spin this, and this is the creative process, but it's looking at the body as a whole. But this is where I succeeded, was by saying, okay, and then there are these movements that seem unattainable to the average person. A muscle up, a handstand push-up, a single leg squat, or a pistol type thing, being able to do a forward roll, backward roll, whatever it may be. And that's what people wanted. So
I
I
see.
would say, you want this? Great. There's going to be a price of admission, but the price of admission is not the price of admission that this organization is selling you or these people are selling you, which is, for example, when I saw Kipping Pullups, I'm like, this is ridiculous. What are you doing? Then I'm like, wait a second. No, Kipping Pullups is genius because that's what we used to do as kids when the coach wasn't watching us.
Mm-hmm.
The coach turned around. We're like, we're going to complete the pull-ups, but we're going to kip to get up there. So I
I
was like,
see.
wait a second. The body sets the
Make it
standard.
efficient.
Yeah, we follow. It's all about efficiency. So what I did was I said, okay, you want this muscle up thing? You got it. You got it. Here's how to do it.
Here's how
And
to do it
because
with a
most
bit
people
of
couldn't
kipping.
access it, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
kipping, strict, whatever it was, like just like go get it. This is how you do it. Here's the roadmap. And because most people couldn't get it, it was like, okay, now let's work backwards. Let's reverse engineer this thing. And let's get to a point where you're completing a movement pattern that is the most complete version of what can become the muscle up. And let me now give you guidance on how to get there, not by working on your weakness, which is what everybody's like, you have to work on your weakness type thing, which is cool. I get it. The weakest link in the chain is going to be the problem. But what I would say is, let's work on your strengths. Let's work on what you're really good at. And let's allow that to inform where you're weak, and then allow the strength to actually carry your weakness in a way that's safe, useful, and long lasting. And that creating a very unique, individualized movement standard, and that allowing it to translate into the performance that you want.
I see. That sounds like literally like in my head, like it just sounds like momentum, like you're utilizing momentum to
Mm-hmm.
get you up there or to perform the pull up. And I was gonna ask you this because I was just very curious. You coming from a gymnastics background where it's like it's very strict, right? Pointed toes, like perfect body line, hollow body,
Mm-hmm.
etc. And something that was always made fun of in CrossFit by the rest of the, I guess, fitness world were these butterfly pull-ups or kipping pull-ups, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, and I was always wondering, how did you come up with that? How did you come to terms with that discrepancy? And you were kind of saying a bit, you touched on about how like you were being a rebel and you were like, you know, I'm okay with like the freestyle. I want to be freestyle and allow people to do that. And I personally value strict movements and doing things with like high movement quality. And like butterfly pull-ups tended to look like really janky looking in
Mm-hmm.
comparison. And I
Makes sense.
understand that there's a um, technique to it, like there's a there's a movement pattern there that has a bit of difficulty of its own. But I was just wondering, hey, how did you come to terms with that? Like, and I guess is it part of that rebel aspect of like, yeah, let's just like hone in on this as well, or
Yeah, I was just like, screw everybody. I don't care. I
I
don't care.
see.
But it came from this. I'll tell you exactly where it came from. It was the first time. So when I was doing gymnastics, I would also go snowboarding.
Hmm.
And through snowboarding, I realized that there were certain tricks that I could do because of gymnastics. And although I never did any flips, like any inversions in snowboarding on 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 the water, I did. So wakeboarding, I did, and I remember doing a tantrum, which is like a backflip from wake to wake for the first time. Which in gymnastics, it would be looked at as a back tuck or a back layout.
Hmm.
And I remember doing this tantrum for the first time and almost landing it and just remembering that my form sucked. But everybody in the boat was ecstatic.
Of
They were
course.
just like, "Oh my goodness, this is incredible. You're
Right.
like a legend." And I
Right.
was like, "Holy shit. This whole gymnastics standard is only for gymnastics." And
Right.
yeah, it may be a product of a long lasting degree of incremental progressions that have happened, influenced by the original idea of artistry, and artistry being looked at as these body positions. But that's something that somebody made up.
Right. Well, it's a
So,
standard of in that world, specific,
mm-hmm,
very niche world, like very few people can really relate to, but it right, it transfers over to the rest of fitness in some way, right?
mm-hmm,
And you mentioned something interesting because this is something I notice a lot. Like, so let's say somebody is slacklining or doing something on the rings, right? And they fall off, or they do
mm-hmm,
like their set ends in an abrupt way that they personally didn't want it to end that way, right? Like, let's say you were doing a back tuck and like you've landed with your knees a little off or something, but to everyone else you looked very impressive,
mm-hmm,
right? I always think about that because most of the time, like especially like on certain acrobatic things, like you're watching circus performers just practicing, and then they're doing something incredibly amazing looking, right? And then they finish, or something happens, and they stop doing that, and they are pissed,
mm-hmm,
right? But meanwhile, you're watching like one of the most impressive displays of physical art,
mm-hmm,
and they are just hating themselves,
mm-hmm,
and like, but nobody realized that you are doing anything wrong, that you did anything wrong. And that aspect I think is very interesting, and it reminds me of like this Miles Davis quote of like, if you hit a wrong note, it's the next note that you play that determines if it's good or bad, right?
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
like something I'll do, like I really like incorporated that. Like, so when I'm slacklining, let's say, and I like to slackline as a hobby, right? I'm really good at it after doing it for 10 years. But anyway, like I'll set up my line in the park, and like, before I used to like do like a lot of spins and turns and whatever, and then I'd fall and I'd be like, oh, like I fell, right? Which is ridiculous because everybody eventually falls. You don't stay on the slack
mm-hmm,
line for all eternity. It's just a natural, like you're up there and then you're not, right?
mm-hmm,
And so like in whenever I would, so I like use that idea of like, it's the determines what note you play after, right? Where, so when I would fall off the slack line, I would fall off now in a way where I kind of make it look like I intended to,
mm-hmm,
or I'll like land on one foot and like spin my other foot backwards and like make it look pretty and do like a little hey, you know, like even though I didn't actually intend to fall at that moment, but like kind of like improvising. And I think that's really important. And then, you know, you're not being fake about it. It's just that kind of it's a part of that art, and not hating yourself like in ridiculous ways, because you are actually doing something that most people would be really proud of it, right? Would really
Mm-hmm.
pride themselves. So anyway, all that stuff, it made me think of that aspect. Like it's pretty interesting, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that element of play is so important, and you're just reminded me of like something that we used to do in gymnastics on the pommel horse, for example. Sometimes when you do a circle on the pommel horse, your hand that goes behind your back doesn't make it all the way, so you slip, and then you kind of you rotate out. It's like you're doing a side flip out.
Mm-hmm.
um that can be very scary, but when you get used to it, what ends up happening is that you start doing it almost on purpose because it's kind of fun,
I
and
see.
it
You're
all of a sudden becomes
spinning.
like a little dismount thing, and it just becomes this joking moment that
Mm-hmm.
a gymnast can have. Or on the trampoline, for example, if you're bouncing on a trampoline, there's this thing you can do to stop the bounce, which is buckling the knees. So you just
Mm-hmm.
buckle the knees. One of the things that you can do on a trampoline if you have control is that as you buckle your knees, because the knees are going forward, you can just lean your shoulders back and you do the lowest backflip of all time, where your
Mm.
head basically scrapes the trampoline.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an actual legit way of stopping your momentum.
I see.
And it's
The
also a way of
ultimate way.
falling in style, because a lot of times what happens is that people come down and by accident their knees buckle and then they land on their back. So it's knowing that when the buckle happens, you can actually turn it into a backflip and then you're falling in style, and it's a playful thing.
That's really
So
cool.
yeah, I think that's part of the creativity. And for me, this is just my personal opinion, is
Mm-hmm.
the people who do this the best are breakers, so break dancers, breakers,
Mm-hmm.
and free runners or parkour athletes or artists. They're really good at utilizing their mistakes to create new patterns.
I see. Yeah, and that's beautiful, right? It's like dance, right? It's
Yeah.
and dancing is like one of the highest forms of skill work. You know, it's so complex and infinite in the amount of ways you can go about things, and it's really cool, man. I
Hmm.
love the fact that the human body can move in so many ways, and yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, I think we got here because of this idea of like kipping pull-ups or butterfly pull-ups.
Right, which
And
is
and sometimes it
yeah.
requires one to say, what if it doesn't matter how you enter or exit a movement? What if you
Hmm.
explore all options and then you do it in a way that I would always say functional movement is something that is only functional if it serves a purpose, if it's useful,
Hmm.
if it's
Like,
safe,
what's
meaning
the
that you can go
function?
in and come out
Hmm.
unharmed, and that it's long lasting in its progression.
Hmm.
And
Long
if you
lasting
have that, those
progression.
three things, then you can do anything.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. What was the first thing?
So safe, useful, long lasting. Safe
Okay,
meaning you can go in and do it unharmed. So for example, in gymnastics, sometimes you tear your hands. It just happens. You're on the bars, rings, T
totally.
bars, you tear your hands. But a lot of times, tearing your hands is a sign of you being unaware of where your body is in
Hmm.
terms of its current state. So sometimes
Right.
if you would overdo it, for example, in gymnastics for us, we had this Russian coach that came along for a while, and if we would tear our hands, he would get so pissed. He's like, "Don't you understand? If you tear your hands today, you can't practice tomorrow."
Yep.
And I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense."
Yeah, you
Why?
always got to stop right before you
Yeah,
know you're
it's
gonna rip.
exactly. I was working hard and I tore my hand. Something bad happened to me. And you're pissed at me? Yeah, it's your body. You need to take care of it. And
Right.
now you can't train tomorrow. Tomorrow you're going to have pain. That's 7 days of now hesitation in your training or discomfort, you're not going to maximize your potential. So safety first. Go in and out and come out unharmed. Should it stress you? Yeah. Should it be intense? Yeah. Should it be a little uncomfortable? Yes. And this is this whole idea of, in movement, one way to inform movement is to help people understand that if you move away from pain, you will enter discomfort, and in discomfort, you will develop yourself. So this is kind of like if you have addiction of some sort. That is causing you pain. It's hurting something. If you move away from addiction, you're going to experience discomfort. Discomfort is a different type of pain. Pain is detrimental. Discomfort is incremental in its progress. It allows you to actually push the needle as positive progression. So that's the safety. Then you have the utility. It needs to fit in within a context that serves a purpose. It has to be task oriented, whether it's through a creative lens or through a pragmatic, just purely mechanical getting something done lens. And this is where kind of progression comes into play, where this is another framework that I'm just kind of opening up an aside here, where I talk about the importance of natural progression versus formal progression versus creative progression. Those are three different lenses to look at things. And if you look at them as a spectrum, it's not a linear spectrum. It's a circular spectrum where you start natural, just expression. And then you go into the more formal stuff that has worked from the past that you are kind of being taught or influenced by. And then creative, which is you create your own style. And that creativity of new style is actually a natural expression. Thus, you start the loop again. And it's kind of like walking up this spiral ladder, this spiral staircase. You're constantly elevating your game. So that's the utility part. And then finally, the longevity. Like, what's the long-lasting piece? And the long-lasting piece is realizing that your pursuit for excellence in your movement is always going to be contextual. Thus, you're going to reach a point in your movement career and your movement adaptation where you're either going to age out of it, people are going to come in that are better than you, whatever it may be, you're going to see a decline. But just because you're seeing a decline in certain areas of your physical movement doesn't mean that you can't pursue that movement, but in a different capacity. Right. For example, in gymnastics, doing an iron cross on the rings, although at a high level gymnastics expression, that's not very challenging. It's actually a B level element, A, B, C, D, E, even F. F is the hardest thing you can possibly do. An iron cross is a B. Okay, a handstand is an A. An iron cross is a B.
Right.
So
pretty
just
insane.
So people, yeah. But you're not going to be able to do an iron cross. Most likely, most people won't be able to do an iron cross for the rest of their lives. But where else could you express an iron cross? Well, maybe the iron cross, instead of expressed on the rings, is expressed between two blocks. Maybe the iron cross, if you start looking at it, it's actually it looks like a push, but it's actually a pull. It's a lat pull. So
I feel like it's both, right? Like it's using the chest, and I don't know. It's like
if you just think about it from the lats, the origin and insertion of lats actually are the only muscle that gets to flip.
What do you mean by flip?
Yeah, so usually we say that the origin of the bicep is around the shoulder, and then the insertion is around the forearm. But for the lats, because there's 3 points of contact, the origin and insertion actually alters and alternates. It's more of like a stabilizer. So it's pushing and pulling are in the lats. Anyways, pushing and pulling are the same thing. I have a whole theory for that. We can talk about it. But anyways, all of a sudden, if you think about a lat pull down, maybe just a lat pull down or a pull up where your elbows stop at the height at 90 degrees or the height of your shoulders, you're in an iron cross position. So it's kind of like, all right. So
or
just
like a Bulgarian dip where like.
Oh, Bulgarian dip. Exactly. But that's what I was going to get to, is that a pull and a push are the same thing, and they fit within this standard of movement. And then I started to think, okay, why was I doing it? Was it for strength? Was it for healing? Was it for coolness? Was it for doing a movement that makes me feel like I belong to an elite group of people that perform at a certain level? And that's your why, so to speak. That's the meaning that you assign for doing what you do. But yeah, that's the longevity part. So yeah, functional movement is safe, useful, and long lasting from that vantage point. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of movement, like my dream move has and always will be the front lever. And
Nice.
I absolutely love that move. And like, if I had to, I always notice I gravitate toward pulling exercises. I know you're saying like there's not a big difference or they could be blended.
There's a big difference.
There is. I know what you're saying, but
Yeah.
that there's sometimes it's a gray area, like a back lever is
Yeah.
also that gray area, right? But yeah, front lever is one of those things that I am determined to get, regardless of how long it takes. Um, and I don't know, I just find beauty in the line of it. And I know, so like, it's funny, anything that looks really difficult, sometimes it might deter people,
Mm-hmm.
but for me it like invigorates me. It makes me
Yeah.
go, that's awesome, because I know that if I do get there, that's gonna be showing I worked really hard to get there. It's like whenever you see someone with a good physique, they
Mm-hmm.
didn't just get that naturally. They had to put work, discipline, all that stuff. So like, that's why I'm like very fascinated with. I personally love bodyweight exercises, not only uh, because it's, well, a couple of reasons, like mastery of the body itself, just without
Mm-hmm.
any much else involved, is I think really key. And then the accessibility aspect, it's much
Mm-hmm.
more readily available to do certain things with just a pull-up bar, and less excuses essentially to say no, I can't do it because I don't have this barbell with this much weight, or
Mm-hmm.
or the right setup, or a spotter, or whatever it is. I just absolutely love melding the two concepts of, well, like, let's say yoga is like one concept I really love, but it's very much like its own, like it has its own specific, like, I guess, ways of doing things. And then like we have calisthenics and gymnastic strength training, and it's like me combining the two is really cool. And then like flexibility training
Mm-hmm.
specifically is also really cool, because flexibility training is just like, a lot of people, I notice get they just get like, really, they think like they'll be inflexible forever, right?
Mm.
But they don't actually, like, let's say you're working on push-ups, right? And you're told, okay, do 3 sets of 10, let's say, right? Or like they know that they need to be methodical, right? And then let's say they're doing bicep curls, right? They're doing 3 sets of 10, and then they reach that level, and they know that they're going to go up by like a couple pounds tomorrow in the next
Mm-hmm.
session, right? But when it comes to flexibility training, for some reason, people don't follow a structured routine, and they just go by feel. Like, okay, if you're going to hold a static pose, right, or a stretch, let's say it's a static one, not dynamic, like
Mm-hmm.
literally just set a timer to ensure that you are getting enough time under tension. And most people don't even like play with that aspect, let alone do that. And I feel like that's where, like, it could be knowledge, it could be like lack of knowledge, they don't know what to do, there's too much like conflicting advice, there's also so many exercises. But I think a big reason is that actually flexibility training is much more excruciating at times than strength training.
Mm.
Mentally,
I
there's
think
this.
I think that's why it's yoga, right? Because getting into these asanas, for example, these
Mm-hmm,
poses requires a level of mental stability
mm-hmm.
that
It's like,
creates the union, right? It's like you
right.
access that ultra set of consciousness, and that's separating yourself, detaching from suffering. Yeah, you're totally right. Um, and there's a difference between the like I'm gonna do the thing to the relaxing into the thing, or
Mm-hmm,
getting into a position that is active enough to sustain the shape that you're getting into,
mm-hmm.
and being okay with just being at the edge. And it taps into a different side of your nervous system. Yeah, I'm with you there. There's also a huge lack of interest because it doesn't feel as cool sometimes.
But it looks cool. I think
I
I
think
think
so
it's
too.
cool. But
It's great.
yeah, like being able to do front splits, middle splits, like these things, like if anyone ever performs those things, people
You
are
know.
impressed. Like
Mm-hmm.
and it's, it's not just that people are impressed though. Like that's not the driving force. It's more so that your body feels good after you do such a training session. Like like
Mm-hmm.
when
Oh
you
yeah,
stretch
yeah.
your
Your nervous system feel like your body feels like it's vibrating at a different level.
Yeah, and yeah, it's exactly right with like so like stretching is excruciating, and it's one of those reasons is because it's literally you're 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 working with nerves on the nervous system level, right? And having the tools to like work through it mentally, like breathing through it. And then also I think a big one is visualization. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you are like always thinking you will never be able to touch your toes, right? Even though you're kind of doing everything right to go there, I think you're like just like holding yourself back a little. It helps so much to like visualize in your mind's eye that you are actually reaching down and like touching your toes or putting your palms flat, like. And this is huge, not just with this is huge in everything, right? Like goal
Mm-hmm.
setting in general. Like, what's your? If I ask you, what's your goal, and like your goal, your 10-year goal, 5-year goal, right? If it's a blank, that's something to work on, right? And the same thing with like your physical training, right? Like what do you work on? And a lot of people don't know. A lot of people will say like I just want to look better. I want to get stronger. I want to lose fat. But it really helps a lot to find out what moves and exercises you actually enjoy
Mm-hmm.
to help you get there.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Can we touch on the visualization for a second? So when I
absolutely.
when I was a kid, young gymnast, I was probably 11, 12. 12. I entered this program. It was called the Technification program in Spain. That's where I grew up doing gymnastics,
Hmm.
and this was kind of the feeder program for the national team. Anyways, when you got into the Technification program, you were assigned psychologists, doctors, and all these things. So I started going to a sports psychologist, and I remember they would make us visualize. And the first thing I learned about visualization is that you will not be ready to do a movement unless you can visualize the movement from a first person perspective.
Hmm.
And this means that a lot of times when you're trying to do a difficult movement, even when you try to look at it in your head, you can only see it from the
From
outside.
a
So you see the
third eye
movement being
view.
right. It's like a third person view.
This is a
Uh,
huge thing you're saying. Go on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is essential for visualization, and what you can do is you can create a progression within your head, um, just through your visualizing, and you start with you see the movement from the outside, you watch yourself do it, you're like, oh, I see it. Now let me try to do it first person.
Hmm.
And a lot of times you can enter the first person, but you'll notice that you pop out of the first person and back to third person. So and until you can do the whole thing from start to finish from a first
Hmm.
person perspective, you won't have visualized the movement and you will never achieve it actually.
Hmm.
Then the next thing that happens is that if you do this often enough, and apparently I think Andrew Huberman just put out a podcast recently talking about this, and that it can only be done in 15-second increments or something like that. I haven't
The
listened to it, but I just
visualization aspect, you mean? Like, okay.
yeah, the focus happens in 15-second increments, I think, and I may be completely butchering this. I
Mm-hmm.
just saw the headline. I haven't even listened to it, but I'm curious to dive in. Anyways, I just wanted to share this because for me, what started to click was eventually in my second like sleep cycle, so maybe from like 4 to 7 or 4 to 6, the like morning psychodelic experience type of dreaming, that's where I would unlock movements. So I was like, oh, I can do a Healy here. I can do a Diamidov, which is like a movement on the parallel bars. Or I can see what a full in looks like, which would be a double backflip with a full twist on the first flip and then a backflip out, or I could see a half in, half out. It would all happen in my dreams, and I could do it in first person. And even
Mm-hmm.
strength elements, flexibility elements, it would happen in my dreams. And then if I allowed that to become a reality, I could actually carry the feeling over into my movement. So, for example, sitting on the ground and doing a press to handstand from an L-sit position where your feet have to go through your legs. That's a
Mm-hmm.
hard thing to do if you don't have that compression.
Right.
And I remember clear as day that when I felt it in my dream, how to pull my thighs up into my belly and
Mm-hmm.
literally feeling like my psoas was just like elongating, I could actually squeeze through. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I started implementing that as my mount on parallel bars. I would do it on the floor. And it only clicked in my mind, in my ability to visualize in my dream. And then I was able to implement it in real life. And it wasn't like instantaneous, but the intention was there.
Gotcha.
So yeah, visualizing, super powerful
That
stuff.
that's awesome.
Sorry.
Mhm.
I just, this is important because it has to do with this idea of emotional fitness, which is the core of, the work that I do in terms of coaching, which is this idea that a feeling is a mental concept. That mental concept has a narrative. And when you couple a feeling that you could call a sensation, but it's a mental construct, with the narrative, it evokes an emotion, and this
Mhm.
emotion is what sets your physiology up to allow you to perform at a certain level. In fact, I would recommend that everybody listening, if you've managed to hang out this long and you're this geeked out, that you go listen to and read Lisa Feldman Barrett's book about how emotions are made. And basically, what Lisa Feldman Barrett says is that emotions are a construct that happens in an instance that is part of the brain's main role, which is to predict what's going to happen next. So, in the
Hmm.
prediction of what's going to happen next, we create a mental construct, which is an emotion, which tells your physiology, your biology, to set yourself up for what it's predicting. And then as we go through life, we're experiencing life through the lens of our emotions. And the better we get at becoming aware of our emotions, the better we adapt and create better accuracy in predicting what's coming. And
Mhm.
thus, we can perform better. And this is the whole idea, is like, if you are able to, in your head, see something, now you can feel something. And when you can feel something, you can alter your state of being, which is your physiology, and that creating an emotion that primes your body to be able to do the thing that you set out to do.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, emotions are huge. We are all emotional beings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very
100%.
important that we have a good grip on them because sometimes they don't serve you well.
Totally. And okay, that's the whole thing. Is I think you have these primal emotions,
Hmm.
which are there to elicit certain activations that are meant to help you survive. But
Hmm.
as we have adapted into different environments, these emotions have become slightly altered because there's a relationship that we have with those emotions. In other words, we have a belief system built around the emotions, and the belief system is the thing that has to change first. Thus, we need to become highly aware of what it is that we're experiencing internally to change or reframe, this is now psychological terms, to reframe the narrative or our relationship to those emotions, and then being able to ride them like waves rather than be stuck by them or have them be something that is causing you to express yourself in a way that's producing a negative outcome for you. And this is what I call emotional fitness, which I personally define as the ability to move into a state of being that translates into purposeful action. In other words, it's about realizing that we are all reflexive beings, meaning we're reacting to everything,
Hmm.
but we have the capacity of becoming deliberate in the way that we do things because we have awareness.
Right.
So in becoming deliberate, even if it's a small portion of our actions on a daily basis, in that which we become deliberate, we now choose to either interpret the emotion, think about the emotion in a certain way, or experience the reality that we're experiencing in a certain way and direct it so that eventually we can become reflexive again, but in a way that now produces the outcome that we desire. So
Gotcha.
it's from reflexive to responsive, or from reflexive to deliberate, and then from deliberate back to reflexive, meaning being able to enter into a state of flow where you're no longer thinking, what am I going to say next? What am I going to do next? That you're just doing, but it's actually something that you have programmed yourself to do.
You train it
And
over time, essentially, like
and
to
that's
rewire.
that's that's training and practice. So I say practice, train, apply. So it's practice is, okay, play with this concept,
Mhm.
learn to work with it, train it, stress test it, put it into different environments, and then apply it, see if it actually works. And then that's your like infinite practice framework.
Ah, that's beautiful. You're very well. You're very well spoken in this regard, and you're able to articulate these complex topics into distilling them. That's very impressive.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah,
I spend an insane amount of time thinking about them, and something I'm like, who cares about this? Just freaking live your life.
it's good. It's good. It means you don't just think about it, but you actually understand it because you're able to explain it on that level. That shows like it goes beyond just thinking about it. um,
Yeah, I mean, this has been a completely selfish endeavor. Okay, I'm
Good.
going to be straightforward. It's a completely selfish endeavor. I want to experience life to the fullest. I want to feel good. I want to be the best version for the people around me. Like I am fully selfish. But as I'm being selfish, I encounter people who are experiencing similar things, and I can't help but to feel something deep in my heart where I empathize so deeply that I feel their pain. And when I see pain, suffering in others,
Hmm.
there's something that just like fucking lights up in me. And my ego says, you can fix them. But it's not to fix them. It's I just have this, and I know that desire is the root of suffering, but I have this desire to bring just a little something that may give them the hope and the access to a state of being that is the state of being that they need to be in this world. And I've had clients who have fucking committed suicide, and I've lost them to suicide.
Hmm.
And I always ask myself, fuck, what did I not do? You know, what did I miss? I've seen
Right.
people, just get lost in trying to be the best version of whatever performer or self. And I just, that suffering is something that if I can shed some light.
You want to minimize human suffering.
Yeah. And maybe I'm delusional. I don't know. But
It's weird because I have most of the time, like as a species overall, I have like very little faith in humanity. But like,
are you a cynic?
it's weird because you could say I'm cynical, but like I'm all at the same time simultaneously on a personal level, I'm very optimistic. You know,
Hmm.
I'm very optimistic, and I love to uplift people anytime I can. If I know that there's something that could help them, I make it a point to share it and not like withhold it. So like it's very strange because like whenever you meet someone like face to face, you kind of like you're usually not being an asshole. You're being a
Hmm.
nice guy. You're being yourself, right? But it's something weird happens with humans. With like when you get them together, like let's say a government form, bureaucracy, corporation, where there's meetings behind closed doors with unethical outcomes, right? Like something happens when like humans are like given power and greed, like insatiable appetite for control. Those are the things that make me feel like lose faith in humanity. Because like it's a weird dichotomy, because like these people might on an individual level be really good people and mean the best and are actually doing what they feel is the best, but
Mm-hmm.
something happens uh, in this control structure or group kind of environment where a lot of that gets muddied up and actually regresses, and
Mm-hmm.
that's so it's I don't know if I'm cynical, but maybe
No, I
it's
think
like
you're a realist. I think you're a realist.
realist, right? Yeah, it's like
Mm-hmm.
elements of everything. It's just like so complex. Everything is so complicated. But
Yeah.
yeah, man.
That you made me think of, and I don't know how true this is, but um, uh, I think Roman emperors, for example, every time they conquered some new territory, in however ways they did it, probably
Hmm.
not ethical. Anything that's conquering is not ethical, but they would have people around them who would whisper into their ear, basically saying, "Okay, you see all this that you just conquered." You will die one day, and this will not go with you. So
Hmm.
this too shall pass. And I mean, if we get into government, I mean, the pandemic alone has just basically showed us that nobody's coming to save you, and those people who thought are coming to save you, they have their own agenda, and
Hmm.
you're definitely not a priority on that.
Yeah, you have to have like
Yikes.
autonomy, and it's good to have varied sources and diverse sources of information to make you see all perspectives of everything as much as possible, which is difficult because there's lots of bullshit.
Hmm.
And
I mean, I'm
dispelling.
I'm a master bullshitter
No,
if
you're
you
not.
think about it. Like
No, you're not.
of course I genuinely care and all these
That's
things,
your
but
imposter syndrome
exactly.
bothering you right now, rearing its ugly head. But in
Mhm.
reality, you are not an imposter, you know?
Mhm.
Always have to remind yourself, because I've gone through that route. It's part of the creative process of every artist. They go through this
Exactly.
feeling, and it comes and goes, and but it's okay. Like it's okay to feel it. Just understand that, hey, shoo away. Like
Exactly. Yeah, shoe fly. Shoe
yeah,
fly.
yeah. and
Uh Good
and I,
stuff.
and I know we are coming close to the end of the time that we have allotted here. So, should we have some questions here uh, from some people that responded when I said we're going to be doing a podcast together. Shall we? We could answer
Let's
them
do it.
together.
Yeah,
Say
together. I
what?
mean,
Yeah,
we can tackle them. Let's see if we can make them like we can maybe hit them to the point. Let's see.
sure. Yeah, let's do like rapid fire.
Rapid fire. That's it. That's the way to say it.
So let's say what is your view on weighted calisthenics? And the reason this person mentioned it is because they thought my progress with weighted chin ups was awesome.
Mhm.
So I guess I'll just say my aspect. I think weighted chin ups in particular and weighted pull ups, which I've been doing, was something I wish I started earlier, because it is awesome to meld the two ideas of pulling and adding weight in a linear fashion. It just needs to be done in a much more mindful progress, where you can't just add weight and willy nilly. You're like, oh well, I added 5 pounds every time. Okay, let's just add 15, right?
Mhm.
You might have elbow issues. You might have uh, just overall recovery. Recovery will, you got to make. It's going to be harder to like finesse between recovery and not. So
Mhm.
those are my thoughts on it. That I think it's a great tool. It's easy to add weight with just a dip belt, um, and but it has its limits, and you have to be much more like cognizant of your self-awareness, essentially, to be able to know when to pull back, make and to overall like not uh, push as hard, because you are already pushing harder,
Mhm.
and I don't know if, what are your thoughts that you want to add to
Yeah,
weighted
I
calisthenics?
agree. I agree with everything you're saying. If it's the answer yes, no, my answer would be yes. Of course, weighted calisthenics, that's totally legit.
Mhm.
Knowing why is key, and looking at it as progressive loading is would be my approach. Is just thinking eventually you will be able to do more than one pull up. So adding some weight will allow you to remain in that like 1 to 5 rep max effort, and that being something that is going to make you stronger. And then if you just take like the template of conjugate programming just from like powerlifting, like Louis Simmons type stuff, you can think about weighted calisthenics as let's say on Monday you do a 1 rep max pull up. Come Wednesday, 48 hours later, you would now do unweighted, and you would work on speed and developing the 1 rep max type thing at a with loaded weight on you will allow you to do the speed work better.
Right.
Yeah, and then this is just an aside, but this is some of my thinking around this whole idea of kipping when it comes to pull-ups, is that if you're doing strict pull-ups on Monday, doing kipping pull-ups on Wednesday is a good idea for developing speed that
Mm-hmm.
also allows you to deploy your capacity to apply force better in terms of your strength training. So yes, and that's just like my quick, short, and dirty version of
Yeah,
it.
explosiveness is a awesome thing to train. I
Mm-hmm.
totally agree as well. It's a lot. Some people do it like very slow and like, okay,
I
we
mean, tempo work is legit. The thing
exactly.
is, loaded calisthenics, if you're just thinking about body weight training, loaded is just another variable. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
do it all
What
and
would
know
you
why.
what would you he says, what would you both say is your best tip to go from a handstand to a freestanding one? I'm
Hmm.
struggling with that progression. That could be so many things.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give you a technique. Back against the wall in a staggered stance, and just playing with the back leg touching the wall. I have a progression on this, a very old progression video that I did. But that's the best way. And then to not think about the handstand in a straight line, but actually think about it in an arch position.
Hmm.
Utilizing the arch to get you off the wall, and
Hmm.
leading with the shoulders, then the hips and the feet, is a great way of starting to develop the tension that eventually will
Eventually
mature into a
later.
straight handstand. Yeah.
Gotcha. And so when you
Yeah.
say like one leg off the wall, one leg still on the wall,
Yeah.
and you scissor and you alternate eventually, or
Yeah, you just kind of like the leg that's on the wall, you just allow the heel to be kissing the wall, and
hmm
then the leg that's off the wall is kind of countering, and you're just playing with that kissing the wall. Then you can do both legs against the wall, so your heels are touching the wall, and then you're pushing with your shoulders, then your hips, and then slowly the heels start to come off, and you just feel that moment of weightlessness,
hmm
and then you get used to that. And then when you have that tension from the anterior chain, so the front portion of your body, now you can pull yourself into a handstand and get nice and straight. And what you're doing is you're using the hands
hmm
to basically leverage that. So it becomes this like micro adjustment that comes from the hands, but it's pulling from the entire body.
Gotcha. That's
Yeah, complicated to explain, but
no, I understand. That was my first initial thought, was to go into a back to wall handstand and do heel pulls, which I made a video on about, if you keep a tight body line and just grip your fingers into the ground until your heels just come off the wall,
mm-hmm.
and then release the grip to put them back on, put the feet back on, and just kind of like play with that until you find the balance. That would be my recommendation, because that was what really helped unlock that floating feeling in a controlled manner.
Mm.
And so that is something I love to do. So yeah.
Okay, decent answer.
Um,
We got something.
and the next one, how do Carl and you warm up,
Mm.
especially for pull-ups? How long and which exercises? Is a cardio-oriented warm-up required to raise the body temperature, or will doing just like the scapula and joint warm-up suffice? Su- Suffice.
Suffice, yeah.
Suffice.
Um, you don't have to do cardio warm up. You want to get your body temperature up,
Hmm.
and what I know is that as soon as I start moving, so just like arm circles, hip circles, knee circles, just bending over and standing up, my blood starts to pump.
Hmm.
So I get warmed up and my core temperature rises. So yeah, you don't have to do a cardio warm up. I do suggest
I agree.
doing some accessory type work. So any scapular movements, any I mean, I like to do like just hold a dumbbell, light dumbbell, just in the hand, and then have it balancing and just doing presses.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's super helpful. So any kind of stabilizing type movements. I do handstands. Handstands always serve as a warm up for me. Handstand walks, lateral walks, planks, plank on my elbows, and doing little shoulder circles just to like
Hmm.
preload the shoulder. Um, I mean, it varies. Sometimes I'm
Yeah.
totally lazy and I just do the pull ups.
Hmm.
It's like,
Yeah, I've noticed that, like, so before I used to warm up like very like I used to be very intricate with it. Nowadays it's like for pull-ups, let's say, it's just like I'll do like the I'll do scapular pull-ups, just very joint specific kind of things. And like I used to always warm up with a band and do with a light resistance band and just do a ton of variations of different ways of moving the arms.
mm-hmm,
And I still do those whenever I feel like it, but I found that my overall, unless it's like legit really cold, like temperature is really cold, like I can get away with not warming up as much nowadays. I've noticed that, like, I know my body's more capable, I think, because I did so much prep work.
mm-hmm,
And what's also interesting is that, like, what used to be difficult for me becomes the warm up
totally.
eventually, which is so beautiful, man.
Mm-hmm,
That's like one of those amazing feelings when you realize it. And
mm-hmm,
yeah, so this person's asking, I'm stuck in the front lever flat tuck
mm-hmm.
position.
Yep.
I can't seem to advance. Any suggestions?
Yeah, that sucks because sometimes the jump from like a flat back tucked in position in a front lever to a
Hmm.
straight leg uh, can take a long, long time, especially if your arms are short relative to your torso.
Hmm.
It's it's
Yeah.
just very hard. Suggestions. I mean, a ton of accessory work, straight arm pull downs, just straight arm pull. That's a very simple way of doing it. Thinking about developing a little bit more stability in the shoulder when being in a closed angle, so hands close to your hips. This can be you lying on a bench and going with two dumbbells or two plates, just going overhead and then pulling to 90 and then back down.
Hmm.
And although that's not the complete front lever position, it just serves as an access point.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. I don't know
Cool.
what to tell you. Squeeze
Cool.
your ass like crazy.
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah. I
Alternate
can
legs,
alternate legs. Yeah, I was gonna say the one thing I
straddle.
straddle could be good. I found the single leg tuck has its progression within itself, and you might notice that when you're doing the one leg tucked in, you're not actually tucking that leg in as far as you actually could, because it something happens when the hips open a little more when you're coming from a inverted hang and going down naturally. For
Mm-hmm.
some reason, the hips open on the tucked leg, and it might help to do that. Do
I
that
would have to
tuck.
see this person
Yeah,
to give them something specific.
yeah.
But there are some gymnasts that go their whole career without being able to do a front lever, and when they do a
Mm-hmm.
front lever, they have to bend their arms because they don't have access to a certain shoulder position.
Mm-hmm.
And they're
Yeah,
just people that your body type just doesn't match the
yeah. It
efficiency that
makes it
one could have.
really hard.
It just sucks. So that's why I say it sucks. Okay, I
Yeah.
was never able to do a front lever
Mm-hmm.
properly.
Mm-hmm.
I never.
What's your height or
I'm 5'8".
5'8"? Okay.
Yeah, so I was like
Yeah.
a taller gymnast.
Gotcha. And
Yeah,
one interesting progression that I was told once, and I've tried it in the past, which was really interesting, was like holding the tucked front lever, but with ankle weights that you progressively
sure.
make heavier, and that could be like a way, like if you're holding the flat tuck or advanced tuck, but you're doing it now with like a pound or something on your
Mm-hmm.
ankles or whatever amount, eventually that might help bridge the gap to
Mm-hmm.
make things so. And also I know that weighted pull-ups or weighted chin-ups, even though it's not a straight arm move, help increase the strength of the lats, as the lats, how they play a role in that
Mm-hmm.
as well. So I guess we'll leave it there for that. And next one, I think uh, this is a much more general question, but it says, I was wondering what would be the right approach to gain muscle or strength while maintaining my weight,
Mm.
but still
Uh,
decreasing fat percent in the
yeah,
process.
count
This,
count some macros. Get
this
your
is
protein in, and then just play with your carbs and fat.
this is probably the most common question in the world, right?
It's crazy.
I think this is the most, because I think this is what everyone wants. Essentially, they want to gain muscle and lose
Mm-hmm.
fat,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a not a linear or like straight pathway to there, because just a real quick, like whenever you are trying to gain muscle, you if you're under eating, yeah, you will lose fat, but it becomes hard to gain muscle when you're under
Oh yeah,
eating, right?
and you can't recover, and
And
any like injury that you have does not get repaired.
yeah, and it rears its ugly head, like a past injury might like appear again because you've been restricting your calories, which is very
Mm-hmm.
strange, but I've noticed that happens.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, you want to get stronger as big as possible. You need to eat more, right? Eat big to
Mm-hmm.
get big. And then, like, but what invariably happens is that you're packing on muscle and the body's not 100% efficient. So it's also packing on some fat at the
Mm-hmm.
same time. So the best way around this is to think in terms of like bulking and cutting cycles of some sort. Like you don't have to be like an insane bodybuilder with like, but you kind of have to keep in mind where like, are you going like, what trajectory do you want? What like signal are you giving your body right now? Is it more
Mm-hmm.
about just like losing fat and trying to maintain as much muscle as possible in the process by maintaining your strength training, or are you still doing your strength training, but with the goal of building as much muscle and hypertrophy as possible, with the understanding that you are also going to gain a little bit of fat in the process, but it's okay because like a few months down the line, maybe you revert back to a little bit of a
Mm-hmm.
deficit, and that's a dance in itself.
Totally. And as you get older, putting on muscle gets a little bit harder. I mean, I feel it now that
Mhm.
yeah, my muscle density doesn't feel like the same it used to be. And when I try to pack on enough protein to build,
Mhm.
um, I get satiated too quickly, so I can't take in enough, and then I add calories elsewhere, and then I don't stay as lean. So
Yeah.
it's fucking hard.
I've noticed like as we get older, you just have to be even more optimized in everything.
Yeah,
Like the more like things you yeah, the more things you do wrong, like the more obvious it becomes.
yeah.
But
If I had a
it's
personal
cool.
chef, it would be great.
Right, right. And
Yeah, and
it's
somebody
just
saying, "Hey, eat now," or
yeah. I love cooking though.
that's good.
Yeah, it's time consuming, but it brings me real joy.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, what else do we have? Because I'm running out of time, unfortunately.
Yeah. We could end it there if you
No,
are.
no, no. Let's hit the last questions. We'll do
Cool.
like
Cool.
actual rapid fire.
Sure. This guy says, I just took my 14-year-old son to the gym for his first time.
Awesome.
He loved it. What kind of programming would you recommend to assist him with full body strength and jumping while being safe for a young newbie? He
Hmm.
enjoyed the machines and calisthenics equipment like pull up bars.
Yeah, have
Um,
him do whatever you're doing. Just be intuitive about how you scale it.
mhm.
That's it.
Cool. Yeah. And rapid fire question from me, is there a dream move that you haven't achieved and wish you did, or still maybe wish you might?
I had this like I wanted to have a one arm handstand. I got that. I've stopped practicing, but if I had one little thing that I wanted to get is a full one arm handstand, which is feet together, and be
Oh,
able
I
to
see.
hold it for 10 seconds solid on both arms. So right now I can hold 5 to 10 seconds feet together, but arm out. I want to be able to get my arm by my hip. Yeah,
Those are
which
high
is a big
standards,
difference.
man.
Yeah, so that would be it. But it would take me. I think it would take me.
Thousands of hours.
Yeah, at least a year to get to getting my hand to my hip, and then it would probably take me 3 years to be able to hold 10 seconds consistently on both sides. So,
Incredible.
mm,
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, this was really a great joy. Like, really awesome to speak with you. Um, it went just as I expected, an awesome conversation. And like I said in the beginning, you were a great inspiration,
mm,
especially very early on. You with Kelly Starrett, I would always look forward to your new videos.
wow.
It was perfectly like it was like useful, like practical advice and geeky at the same time because like it would like satisfy my inner geek, the humorous and external rotation and
Yeah.
all this stuff, and I would understand it because I was going to nursing school at that time and like
How cool.
learning about anatomy and physiology and kinesiology, all that stuff, and I was like, yeah, this stuff is like beautiful. So it's really really beautiful that we were able to
Uh,
talk, and I hope you know find your voice and keep making content that excites you, and
mm,
always go back to why you are doing what you're doing, and you're going to find your heart in it, and that will easily convey itself in over the videos or whatever you have to
amazing.
make.
Thank
So
you. Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for including me and for being so kind with your words. I learned a lot from you today, so I take a lot with me, and yeah, I look forward to more conversations like this. And yeah, if anybody listening has questions or something comes up that resonated, I love hearing from people. Yeah, message me either in the comments or on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, wherever you find me. And yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it again.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Thank you, man. And everyone, yeah, please leave a comment. Let us know what you thought. Don't forget to hit the subscribe and hit the bell, as we always have to say.
yeah.
And I'll see you, all of you, in the comment section, and we will talk later.
All right.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Bye.
Bye.